Last week, I learned just how far my HOA Karen neighbor was willing to go to control me. Because when I calmly told her I wasn't joining her precious HOA, she didn't argue, she didn't shout. She called the cops on me for standing in my own yard. And as those officers walked up, Karen stood behind them with this proud little smirk, like she finally put me in my place. But here's the part she didn't know. The reason her entire plan was about to collapse. The reason I didn't panic for even a second. I'm her landlord. Yeah. The same Karen who tried to drag me into her HOA? The same Karen who weaponized fake rules and false complaints? She's been living on my property this whole time, and hiding a secret she prayed I would never discover. So when she called the cops, she handed me the perfect opportunity to expose everything. I never expected something as simple as buying a quiet lakeside property to turn into a war. Honestly, when I first moved here, I wasn't looking for drama. Not even a little. I just wanted peace, space, and maybe a chance to fish on weekends without driving 2 hours to do it. The property was perfect. Old house. Big yard. Private lake access. And most importantly, not part of any HOA. The listing said that clearly. My lawyer confirmed it. The county confirmed it. I was free. No rules. No committees. No neighbors measuring the color of my mailbox. But you know how some people are. Some people crave control so badly, they can't stand to see others living without it. And that's how I met her, Karen. She lived 3 houses down from me in a gated HOA community that bordered part of the lake. But that neighborhood and my property were completely separate. Different land deeds. Different zoning. Different everything. Still, Karen acted like she owned the entire lake. The first time I met her, she knocked on my door so aggressively I thought someone was hurt. I opened it fast, only to find her standing there clutching a clipboard like she was about to issue me a ticket. "Hi," I said, catching my breath. "Everything okay?" She didn't even say hello. "Are you the new owner?" she demanded. "Yeah," I replied slowly. "I'm Sam." She scribbled something on her clipboard. "Be aware," she said, "our HOA has very specific rules regarding the use of our shared lake." I blinked. I wasn't even unpacked yet. "Sorry," I said. "Your lake." She sighed like I was a child refusing to understand basic math. "This whole area falls under our HOA jurisdiction," she announced with way too much confidence. "So if you plan to use the lake, dock a boat, host gatherings, or even paint your house, you'll need to get approval first." I looked at her for a solid 5 seconds. Then I pointed toward my driveway. "See that?" I asked. "That's my deed. My land. My lake access. This property isn't part of your HOA." She actually laughed, one of those sharp, condescending laughs that make your teeth clench. "Oh, you're confused," she said. "The previous owner used the lake according to our rules. You'll need to sign up with our association to continue." I was trying to be patient, but she was making it impossible. "Look," I said firmly, "I'm not joining an HO. My lawyer already confirmed I'm not under one." And that's when she narrowed her eyes, like she just discovered her new favorite enemy. "You really don't want to make this difficult," she said quietly. I didn't reply. I just closed the door. It wasn't rude. It was necessary. But that was the start. The moment I unknowingly became her personal project. The next few days were peaceful. I worked from home, unpacked boxes, trimmed the hedges, and finally tried to relax. But Karen was always around. She'd walk her dog at the edge of my driveway and stare. She'd pause when I took out the trash and inspect my bins. Once, she even stood at the property line taking photos of my fence. I asked her what she was doing. "Documenting violations," she said. My patience was already thinning, but I tried to ignore her. Then one evening, it all exploded. It was Friday around 6 p.m. Perfect weather. The lake looked like glass. And after the craziness of moving, I just wanted to test my new fishing spot. So I walked down the small wooden path that led to the water. And for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely relaxed. But that feeling didn't last long. Because as soon as my hook hit the water, I heard yelling behind me. I turned, and there she was, storming down the path like she was about to arrest me. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted. "Fishing," I said. "Kind of obvious." "This is a clear violation," she snapped. "A violation of what?" I asked, already exhausted. "The HOA lake use rules," she declared. I closed my eyes for a second. Took a breath. "Karen," I said firmly, "for the last time, I'm not in your HO. Fishing on my own property is not illegal. Please leave." She took out her phone. "I'm calling the association president." I shrugged. "Call whoever you want. Doesn't change anything." She froze. And something in her expression shifted. Not anger. Not frustration. It was fear. And she walked away without another word. I didn't know it then, but she was hiding something. Something big enough to terrify her. The next morning, I woke up to 2 official-looking papers taped to my door. Notice of violation, unauthorized lake use, notice of fine, $150 for improper fishing equipment. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. I didn't even bother removing them. They weren't legal. They weren't real. They weren't anything. But Karen didn't like being ignored. Because that same afternoon, at exactly 4:17 p.m., she marched down my driveway again. "You didn't pay your fine," she snapped. "Because it's not real," I replied calmly. "Look," she said, leaning closer, "everyone in this area follows our rules. You don't get to be special." "Karen," I said, "there's no area. There's your HO. And then there's my property. You need to understand," she hissed, "that when we have rules, people obey." I shook my head. "I'm done repeating myself." And then I gave her the line that lit the fuse. "You don't have any authority over me." Her face went pale. Then red. Then something darker, something like rage mixed with humiliation. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, another. And without saying a single word, she dialed 911. Right there. Standing in my yard. Maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. "Yes," she said loudly, "I'm at 214 Lakeside Drive. My neighbor is refusing to comply with HOA regulations and is becoming aggressive." Aggressive? I hadn't even moved. I stood there in disbelief as she kept talking to the operator, fully committed to her performance. The moment she hung up, she smirked. "They'll explain it to you," she said coldly. "Enjoy your lesson." Then she walked away. And I just stood there, speechless, angry, and honestly a little stunned. But deep down, underneath the frustration, there was a small spark of confidence. Because I knew something Karen didn't. Something that would make everything she did completely fall apart. And she was about to learn that lesson the hard way. She had no idea who she was messing with. She had no idea. I was her landlord. When Karen called the cops on me, I honestly thought they'd show up annoyed, roll their eyes, and leave. I mean, who calls 911 over a neighbor not joining their HOA? But as I stood there waiting, I realized something important. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about the lake. It wasn't even about the HOA. Karen wanted control. And the worst kind of people are those who think authority is something they can borrow whenever they feel threatened. I stayed in my driveway, arms crossed, watching the road. I wasn't nervous. Maybe a little irritated, but mostly calm. I didn't do anything wrong. But Karen was pacing in front of her house like she was preparing for a courtroom trial. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser turned onto the street. Karen's entire body snapped into performance mode. She stood straight, smoothed her cardigan, fixed her hair, and put on that fake shaking voice people use when they want to look like victims. The officer stepped out, mid-40s, tired eyes, calm demeanor. He wasn't expecting drama. Poor guy. Karen rushed toward him. Officer! Officer! Thank goodness you're here, she cried dramatically. He threatened me. I actually laughed. Quietly but still. The officer looked at her, then at me, then back at her. Ma'am, slow down, he said. What exactly happened? She pressed her hand to her chest like she was about to faint. He's refusing to follow our HOA rules. He yelled at me. He threatened to violate our lake use policies and refused to pay his fines. My fines, I repeated under my breath. The officer walked toward me. Sir, can you explain your side? I didn't threaten anyone, I said calmly. I told her, politely, that my property is not part of her HOA. She's been trying to force me into it. That's all. Karen cut in, yelling over me. He's lying. He's been aggressive. He's using the lake without permission. The officer held up his hand. Ma'am, I will talk to you in a moment. Please let him speak. She stepped back, but the glare she gave me could have melted steel. I continued, my property is independently deeded. It's grandfathered land. It predates the HOA by about 20 years. I checked with the county before purchasing. I'm not a member. I'm not required to follow their rules. The officer looked between us, then asked the question that finally shifted everything. Ma'am, is his property legally within your HOA? Karen hesitated. It was tiny, a split-second pause, but I caught it. So did the officer. Yes, she lied. It is. Absolutely. Do you have documentation? He asked. Well, the association handles the paperwork. But yes, it's part of our community. The officer nodded slowly. All right. Let me confirm some things. Sir, do you mind if I see your deed or any proof of the property boundary? Not at all, I said. This was the moment Karen hadn't prepared for. I walked inside, grabbed the folder from my office, and handed the officer the printed county documentation and the original deed. The officer took his time reading it. It was silent except for the sound of paper flipping. Then he asked me, you said this land predates the HOA? Yep. The HOA was created in 1996. Original house and land parcel are from 1974. He nodded again, thoughtful. Finally, he walked toward Karen. Ma'am, he said, according to this deed and county documentation, his property is not part of your HOA. Karen's face dropped. That can't be right, she stuttered. He still needs to follow the lake rules. This is a shared environment. Our HOA controls the shoreline. No, I corrected gently. Your HOA controls your shoreline. My shoreline is on my land. My lake access is private. She shook her head violently like a child refusing to accept their wrong. You don't understand, she snapped at the officer. He's going to ruin everything. He's breaking the rules. This is not fair. The officer stayed calm. Ma'am, you cannot issue fines or notices to someone who is not under your HOA. And you cannot call the police for a civil disagreement unless there is an actual threat or illegal activity. He was a threat, she shouted. He refused to comply. Non-compliance with HOA rules, the officer said firmly, is not a police matter, especially when the person is not a member. She opened her mouth again, but he cut her off. If you falsely report threats or fabricate violations in the future, you could face consequences. That shut her up. For a moment. The officer walked back to me. You haven't done anything wrong, he said. But I recommend documenting any interactions with her, just in case. Trust me, I said. I've been doing that already. He nodded, wished me a good day, and left. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the street, humiliated, angry, and confused. I walked past her toward my house. Not a word. not a glance. But Karen didn't like being ignored. She suddenly shouted, "This isn't over." I stopped mid-step, turned slightly, and said, "For your sake, Karen, you might want to make sure you're following the rules too." Her face went white. She didn't know what I meant. But she knew I meant something. She glared at me one last time, then stomped back to her house. Later that evening, I sat in my living room going through paperwork. I knew something about Karen didn't add up. She acted like a dictator, but earlier, when the officer asked about documentation, she panicked. People like her only panic when they're hiding something. So I began digging. I checked county records, zoning maps, public HOA filings. Something strange popped out instantly. One of the houses in Karen's HOA wasn't owned by the resident. It was a rental property. A rental managed by a company, and leased to a woman named Karen Sanders. I stared at the screen, then at the address. Her address. My stomach turned. No way. I cross-referenced the parcel number. No mistake. Karen was renting her home. She wasn't an owner. She wasn't eligible for HOA leadership. She wasn't even technically allowed to vote in HOA matters. And the name of the property owner? I almost laughed out loud. Because that name was mine. My old landlord company? The one I dissolved 2 years ago? I never transferred one of the parcels out of it. And the house Karen lived in, that exact address, that exact unit, was still under that company's name. My name. My old business. I wasn't just her neighbor. I wasn't just the guy she tried to fine. I was Karen's landlord. No wonder she freaked out when the officer asked about documents. No wonder she lied about everything. She was living inside an HOA she didn't legally qualify to run, in a house she didn't know I owned, while trying to control me. The irony was almost beautiful. But I wasn't angry anymore. Now I was curious. Because if Karen had been breaking HOA rules herself, I needed to know how badly. And trust me, I was about to find out. Finding out I was Karen's landlord didn't make me feel powerful. It didn't even make me angry. Honestly, it just made everything make sense. Her desperation. Her panic. The way she threw the words rules and authority around like they were weapons. People who have real authority don't act like that. Only people terrified of losing it do. And Karen was terrified. But I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I just wanted the truth. So the next morning, I did something simple. I emailed the HOA. Not Karen. Not her committee. The official HOA management office, the one actually listed in the county registry. My message was polite and straightforward. "Hello, I'm a neighboring property owner, not part of your HOA. I need to confirm the residency and voting status of a tenant currently living at Karen's address. Could you provide the HOA's policy on renters and board eligibility?" I didn't need to accuse anyone. I didn't need to expose Karen. All I wanted was clarity. Surprisingly, they replied within 2 hours. And the email? Well, it was interesting. It said, "Only deeded property owners may serve on committees or vote on HOA matters. Renters are welcome to attend meetings, but they hold no decision-making authority." I reread that line 3 times. So Karen, this woman who had been trying to control me, trying to fine me, calling the cops to enforce her rules, writing made-up violation notices. She wasn't even allowed to vote in her HOA. She was legally powerless. But that wasn't the best part. The email included a PDF attachment, the most recent HOA board and committee roster. I opened it. I scrolled. And then I saw something that made me lean back in my chair and stare at the ceiling. Karen's name wasn't on any list. Not the board. Not the committees. Not even the volunteer teams. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't a board member. She wasn't anything. Just a renter pretending to be in charge. And that wasn't just embarrassing, it was illegal under the HOA's own bylaws. But Karen wasn't just pretending, she was enforcing. That's when my curiosity shifted into something more focused. If she lied about her authority, what else was she lying about? Later that day, I decided to walk the neighborhood. Not spying. Just observing. And the more I saw, the more things clicked. Across the street, a guy was repainting his porch railings. He stopped when I walked by. "You new here?" he asked. "Yeah. Just moved in." He nodded, then lowered his voice. "Watch out for the HOA lady." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen." He exhaled like I had said the name of a demon. "Yes. Her." I played dumb. "She told me she runs the HOA." He laughed way too loudly. "She doesn't run anything. She harasses old folks and pretends she has power. She scared off the last 3 newcomers." "Why doesn't anyone report her?" I asked. He shrugged. "Most people here avoid conflict. Families. Retirees. Single moms. They don't want drama." I nodded. "Has she ever called the cops?" I asked. He looked at me. And his face said enough. More than she should. That made something twist in my chest. Not anger, but a kind of heavy understanding. Karen didn't just dislike me. She had a pattern. A long one. Maybe she wasn't evil. Maybe she was lonely, insecure, or obsessed with control because her life felt out of control. But that didn't excuse what happened next. Because Karen didn't calm down after the cops visited. She escalated. That night, it was almost 11 p.m. when I heard a noise outside. Not loud. Not violent. Just a small metallic click near my porch. I looked through the window. Someone was placing something on my front step. I opened the door and called out, "Hello." The person jumped, almost dropped a stack of papers, and turned around. It was Karen. Standing there. At 11 at night. Holding a binder full of printed HOA documents. "What are you doing?" I asked. She straightened her back. "You need to understand the rules," she said stiffly. "I printed everything. So you can review it." "I don't need them," I said. She shoved the binder closer to me. "You do," she insisted. "Everyone does. We maintain order here." "Karen," I said gently, "you're not in charge of the HOA." Her face twitched. "I am part of the committee. You're not." Silence. Her breathing quickened. She clutched the binder like it was a lifeline. "You don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. And for the first time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded scared. I said it softly. "You're a renter." Her eyes snapped up to mine, wide, panicked, almost pleading. "That doesn't mean anything," she said quickly. "I've been here 7 years. I practically run this neighborhood. People listen to me. They trust me." Her voice shook when she said, "Trust." It hit me then. She wasn't just overbearing. She wasn't just controlling. She was desperate to feel important. But desperation makes people dangerous. "Karen," I said, "you need to stop trying to enforce rules you don't have authority over." Wrong move. Her entire expression changed. The fear disappeared. The anger returned. Sharper. Colder. "You think you're better than me," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I think you're creating problems you don't need to." "I create order," she snapped. "You create chaos." That pushed her over the edge. She threw the binder at my feet. "Fine," she said. "If you won't follow the rules, then the HOA will deal with you." I shook my head. "I talked to the HOA today." Her face froze. "And they said you're not authorized to issue violations. Or fines. Or anything." She swallowed hard. "That's not true." "It is." She took a step back. Then, another. You made a huge mistake confronting me, she whispered. You don't know anything about this place. Actually, I said, I know more than you think. And that's when I said the 8 words that made her knees literally weaken. I know you're renting the house you live in. Her breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back like she'd been hit. Who told you that? She whispered. I found out myself. You had no right. I didn't need rights. It's public record. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. If the HOA finds out, she stopped. Mid-sentence. Realizing she said too much. Realizing she exposed herself. Realizing I now held something she'd been hiding for years. She shook her head violently. Stay out of my business, she said. You'll regret it if you don't. Then she turned and hurried away, almost tripping over her own feet. I watched her run back to her house. Not angry. Not satisfied. Just thinking. Because Karen wasn't scared of me. She was scared of something much bigger. Something inside that HOA. Something she had been hiding from them. And I was done guessing. So the next morning, I started digging deeper. Because whatever secret Karen was hiding, it was time to bring it into the light. By the next morning, I knew 2 things for sure. Karen wasn't just overstepping. She was terrified of the HOA finding out something she'd done. Her reaction when I mentioned her renting? That panic wasn't about embarrassment. It was about exposure. So I decided to keep digging. Not to destroy her. Not yet. But to understand what she was hiding. I started with public records. The HOA was required by state law to publish meeting minutes, annual budgets, and voting history. Most people never look at these documents. But I did. And within 20 minutes, something was already wrong. Very wrong. Every year, the HOA collected about $180,000 from its residents. Maintenance, landscaping, repairs, the usual stuff. But the expenses, they didn't add up. Some charges were massive. $14,800 for community beautification, $7,500 for lake monitoring fees, $21,000 for equipment upgrades, but there were no details. No receipts. No vendor names. Just vague line items. I kept scrolling. And suddenly, 3 years back, a committee name appeared, Lakeside Environmental Committee, Chair, K. Sanders, Karen. My eyebrows shot up. She wasn't allowed to hold any HOA position as a renter. She wasn't allowed to approve expenses. She wasn't allowed to manage funds. But according to the paperwork, she had. 4 years. Then it got worse. 2 of the vague expenses from those years were signed under her name, electronic approvals. That meant Karen had authorized expensive projects she had no legal right to touch. But here's the part that made my chest tighten. The environmental contractor listed on those approvals? It was a fake company name. A name that didn't exist in the business registry. A name with no website. No tax ID. No phone number. A total ghost. Something clicked in my brain. Did she create a fake vendor? Approve fake projects? And funnel HOA money somewhere? I sat back in my chair. This wasn't a controlling neighbor anymore. This was fraud. Actual, provable fraud. And the HOA had no clue. But Karen knew. That's why she panicked. That's why she obsessed over control. That's why she acted like the queen of rules. Because if anyone questioned her legitimacy, everything she'd built would collapse. Around noon, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it. Karen. She looked exhausted. Dark circles. Messy hair. Eyes red like she hadn't slept. I need to talk to you, she said quietly. I considered shutting the door. But something about her tone stopped me. Fine, I said. But keep it short. She stepped inside like she'd been rehearsing this moment all morning. I know what you found, she said. Which part? I asked. The fact you're a renter? The fake authority? The committee you weren't allowed to run? Or the financial signatures? Her face broke. Literally broke. You don't understand, she whispered. Then explain. She sat on the edge of my couch like her legs could barely hold her. I wasn't trying to scam anyone, she said softly. I swear I wasn't. Karen, I said, $40,000 of HOA funds went to a vendor that doesn't exist. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? She swallowed hard. The HOA never did anything, she said. Not a thing. The lake was dying. The shoreline was eroding. The fish population was dropping. I begged them to act, and they ignored me. I raised an eyebrow. That's not fraud justification. I know, she said, voice cracking. But someone had to do something. So you made up a company? I asked. Sort of. Sort of. She looked at the floor. I hired a friend. A guy who did environmental work off the books. He helped with invasive weeds, shoreline cleanup, fish testing, little stuff. He didn't want to deal with licensing or vendor paperwork, so I, simplified things. You created fake invoices, I said bluntly. She nodded slowly. And you approved them using a position you weren't even allowed to hold. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't take a dime, she whispered. Not $1. I wasn't stealing. I was fixing what they refused to fix. But you hid it. Yes, she said. Because the HOA board is useless. They would have stopped everything. I didn't respond. Because, honestly, I didn't fully know what to think. She was wrong. Deeply wrong. But she wasn't a thief. She was a vigilante with terrible judgment. And now you're scared the HOA will find out? I asked. Yes, she whispered. If they see those approvals, if they find out I wasn't legally allowed to authorize anything, I could get sued. Or worse. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She looked up at me, eyes pleading. That's why you need to stop digging, she said. Please. I know I've been hard on you. But you don't understand what I've built here. What you built. I repeated. Karen, you've been terrorizing people. She winced. I thought I was helping. You called the cops on me. I panicked, she said quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at her. This wasn't the Karen who lectured me. This wasn't the Karen who screamed about rules. This wasn't the Karen who threatened everyone. This was a woman whose entire identity was built on a lie she told herself. And now it was cracking. She wiped her eyes. Please don't tell the HO. I can fix everything. I just need time. I let out a long breath. Karen, I said softly, I don't want revenge. She looked up sharply. Then what do you want? She whispered. I want you to stop harassing me. Stop making up rules. Stop pretending you're in charge. And stop calling the police. She nodded quickly. Too quickly. I can do that. I swear. I'll stay out of your way. And, I added, you need to come clean to the HOA. Her face drained of color. I can't, she said. If I do, they'll destroy me. If you don't, I said, they'll find out anyway. She stood there trembling. I'll lose my home, she whispered. I hesitated. Then I said the line that changed everything. You won't lose your home. She blinked at me. I own your home, Karen. Her breath hitched. I know, she whispered. And that's what scares me most. I softened my voice. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm not your enemy. But things can't keep going like this. She nodded weakly. I'll think about it. Then she rushed out of my home like the floor was collapsing beneath her. 2 days passed. No binder on my porch. No fake fines. No screaming. No staring. No pacing. For the first time, the neighborhood felt quiet. Too quiet. Then, on Thursday evening, a notice appeared in my mailbox. A real one. From the HOA. Mandatory Community Meeting, Saturday, 4 p.m. Topic: Unauthorized activity and misuse of committee positions. Karen must have seen it too. Because later that night, I saw her through her window, pacing, crying, talking on the phone, shaking her head violently. She knew. The HOA had discovered something. Maybe someone else asked questions. Maybe a board member checked the records. Maybe the officer mentioned my property check. Whatever the reason, the truth had surfaced. And Saturday was coming. When the day arrived, the clubhouse parking lot was already full. People whispered, glanced around, looked confused. Some angry, some scared, some tired. I walked in slowly. Karen was at the back. Alone. Hands shaking. When she saw me, she looked like she was about to crumble. The HOA president stepped to the front. Today, he said, we are here to address a serious violation. Everyone turned. Everyone waited. And Karen closed her eyes. Because she knew. This was it. The moment everything came crashing down. I wasn't expecting that morning to feel so heavy. Even though I had planned everything carefully, even though I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong, there was this strange mix of relief and sadness sitting in my chest. It was eviction day. A part of me kept thinking, how did we even get here? How did a simple land dispute, a simple boundary argument, turn into police calls, harassment, fake HOA letters, public scenes, and a neighbor tearing her own life apart? But deep down, I knew the truth. Karen built this for herself. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. Power grab by power grab. And today was the day everything caught up with her. The last morning, I got up early. Made coffee. Sat at the dining table with my documents spread out. The deed copies, permit approvals, the eviction notice, the police report, even the photos I took of her throwing rotten fish into the lake. And for the first time in months, the house was quiet. No yelling. No banging. No threats. No HOA papers stuffed under my door. It felt strange. Around 8:30 a.m., I saw a moving truck pull into her driveway. Then another car, her daughter's. Then a gray SUV, someone who looked like a friend or maybe a relative. They all stood outside, talking quietly. No shouting. No pointing at my house. No dramatic speeches like before. Just exhaustion. It was the first time I had ever seen Karen look small. Her hair wasn't styled. Her usual smug expression was gone. Her shoulders were slumped, like she was holding up the weight of everything she'd lost. The HOA presidency, her fake authority, her reputation, and now her home. When she saw me through my window, she looked away. Not angry. Not plotting. Just embarrassed. If she had acted like this months ago, none of this would have happened. The final walkthrough around 10 a.m., I walked outside with the property manager to meet her for the final inspection. I expected yelling. I expected arguments. I expected her to pull out some new rule, or law, or technicality that she invented overnight. But she surprised me. She just stood there quietly in the living room, looking around at the empty walls and boxes. "This used to feel bigger," she said softly, not looking at me. I didn't say anything. This wasn't the time for "I told you so." She handed over the keys. Her hands were shaking a little. "The locks," she whispered. "You'll probably want to change them." "I already scheduled it," I replied. She nodded. Then lifted one more envelope from the counter, the last rent payment she owed. "I'm not late," she said. "Not this time." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. But it was something. A tiny piece of honesty, finally appearing after months of deception. The secret she never wanted me to find before she left. She said something that made the entire story suddenly make sense. She stood at the doorway, boxes in her arms, and without looking back she said, "I only pushed the HOA stuff because I needed somewhere to feel in control. My daughter moved out. My husband left. Everything felt like it was slipping." Her voice cracked, but she caught herself quickly. "I thought, if I could run something, if I could make something bigger than myself, then I wasn't losing." I didn't respond. Because, honestly, in that moment, I felt something I never expected to feel toward her. Not anger. Not victory. Just sadness. Her secret wasn't a scandal. It wasn't about money or crime. It wasn't about some dark plan. It was loneliness. Crushing, quiet loneliness. The kind that makes people cling to power because they're terrified of feeling invisible. And for a second, just a second, I felt bad for her. But feeling sympathy doesn't mean forgiving the damage she caused. She still called the cops on me. She still harassed me on my own property. She still dragged me into a fake HOA scheme. She still threw garbage into the lake and blamed me. She still created months of stress for no reason. So I didn't say much. Just a quiet, "Take care." She didn't answer. She just walked to her daughter's car, sat inside, and stared straight ahead. As her Sierra pulled away, I watched them drive off slowly. No shouting. No dramatic speech. No last attempt to win. Just silence. For the first time since I moved there, the street felt peaceful. The lake water was calm. The wind was gentle. Birds were actually chirping, something I hadn't heard in a while because nature noise was one of the things she complained about. And in that moment, I felt something lift off my shoulders. A weight I had been carrying for far too long. The aftermath, what happened next over the next few weeks, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. People started coming to the lake again. The actual HOA, the real one from the other side of the neighborhood, held a meeting explaining they never authorized her claims. Neighbors who once avoided me because of her rumors started waving again. And the property. I renovated it and rented it to a small family. Quiet, polite, respectful. The atmosphere changed almost overnight. But the interesting part? Every now and then, I'd hear bits of news about her. She moved in with her daughter temporarily. Then she tried to join another neighborhood board. They rejected her after a background check. She apparently tried starting a new community group somewhere else. It didn't work. Because once people know the pattern, they don't fall for it again. Some people build communities. Others try to control them. She was the second kind. What I learned from all of this, I thought revenge would feel loud, triumphant, explosive. But in reality, revenge is quiet. It's the silence after the storm. It's knowing the truth finally came out. It's seeing someone face the consequences of their own choices, not because you destroyed them, but because they destroyed themselves. Karen wasn't ruined because I evicted her. Karen ruined herself when she chose control over kindness, rules over respect, power over peace, and lies over simple honesty. All I did was stop protecting her from reality. And that was enough. Epilogue. One last thing. About a month later, I got a letter. No return name. No address. Inside was a short handwritten note. "I'm sorry. For everything. K." No excuses. No explanations. Just that. And for the first time, I believed her. Because sometimes people break themselves before anyone else gets the chance. And sometimes, the only way they finally see the truth is when they lose everything they were fighting so hard to control.